Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bernard-Henri Lévy, philosopher, filmmaker, and activist. Thomas Kaplan, Chairman and Chief Investment Officer for the Electrum Group. And our moderator, Richard Hurowitz, CEO of the Octavian Report.
Okay, so got a anyway. So hi, I'm Richard Hurowitz. I am the founder and publisher of the Octavian Report. We're really proud to be this year working with Concordia. It's a great pleasure to be here. For those of you who don't know us, we are a journal of ideas. We cover foreign policy, investments, and culture. And we are unabashedly for expertise, which is a little bit of a counterintuitive, contrarian trend. So in any event, you guys should all have gotten a copy of our magazine. Please check us out and subscribe. And we're very excited to be doing a collaborative issue with Concordia, and it's amazing to see how this conference has grown. So congratulations to Nick and Matt and George. I'm here today to talk about the Kurds. To my left is Thomas Kaplan, who is an investor and a philanthropist, and to his left is Bernard-Henri Lévy, who is one of the few people in the world who is known by their initials, BHL. Bernard is a filmmaker, an intellectual, and a philosopher. And they are together the founders of a new organization called Justice for Kurds, for the Kurds, JFK. So I think you already have one set of initials. I hope you don't have designs on JFK, but who knows. But in any event, maybe I'll start with you, Bernard. For everyone's benefit, who are the Kurds, and why is it that they do not have a state?
Who are the Kurds? A great people, an embodiment of values which I know are highly praised in America: faith, patriotism, bravery. They are a people where the Me Too idea has a sense. The women fight on a foot of equality with the men, with no discrimination. It is one of the countries where Islam matches with moderation, with secularism, with democracy. The Kurds are the reply to the question of the possible matching between modernity and Islam. They are not the only, of course. You have other countries in the world when you have such a democratic, modern Islam, enlightened Islam, but the Kurds are really the embodiment of that. And they have been for years, and that's how I met them, more recently than my friend and comrade Tom Kaplan. He has a longer experience than mine, but I met them recently in a very precise circumstance where they were making a barrier, a wall of their own body, own flesh and blood to protect us against ISIS. When ISIS was raging, when ISIS were organizing terrorist attacks all over the world and the West, where the rest of the world escaped like rabbits in front of two big lights, the one who held firm, the one who resisted, the one who were our boots on the ground, were the Kurds. These are the Kurds for me.
So, Tom, you have somewhat of a reputation of being a geopolitical strategist and an excellent analyst. I'm curious, putting the moral case aside, but just from a geopolitical viewpoint, how do you think the West should be thinking about the Kurds? I mean, and I guess why has this cause not been received either more attention or been more sympathetic to people in the West?
The Kurds suffer from the tyranny of geography. They are surrounded by various regimes who, with a certain amount of legitimacy, fear what the ascendancy of the Kurds, what an independent Kurdish state would mean. So, for example, whereas we have an autonomous region in Iraq for the Kurds, there are twice as many Kurds in Iran. There are more Kurds in Turkey. The reality is that you're dealing with a people of 25 million who are arguably the most disenfranchised group, cohesive cultural and ethnic group in the world. Do they deserve their own state? The reality is that everywhere where they've been allowed to engage in self-government, they have been beacons of hope. As Bernard was referencing, we're dealing here with a state that not only shares our interests, but, and I would say that the moral dimension in foreign policy should be a very important one, shares our values. The Kurds are representative of a tolerance, of a moderate Islam that can be leveraged into an arc of stability in the region. Now, when you ask about what our interests are, you really have to segregate that into the various groupings in which the Kurds find themselves. So, for example, in Turkey, you're dealing with an organization called the PKK, which has been declared a terrorist organization. In Iran, people forget, but the only time in modern times when the Kurds had their own state was in Iran during a particular period of instability after the Second World War. What was called the KDPI, Kurdish Democratic Party, Iran, established the Republic of Mahabad between January and December of 1946. Its leader, Qazi Mohammed, was hanged by the Shah in 1947, and they still haven't really recovered from that. But the reality is that the Kurds have been and remain a force on the ground throughout the region. If I were to focus on two areas where it is a connection between our national interests, our moral interest, and our strategic interest for all of our allies in the region, it would be in reinforcing the stability of the Kurdish autonomous region in Iraq, and I would argue very strenuously that the United States should not abandon the YPG forces, who were the backbone of the Syrian Democratic Forces, who occupy almost 30% of eastern Syria, and if anything, are the greatest impediment to Iran building a land bridge from Tehran all the way to Latakia on the Syrian coast. So with the Kurds, you find an unusual confluence of both interest and values. These are people who we can support without compromising any of our principles. And as Bernard referenced, they're the best fighters in the region. They're great friends to have.
Bernard, so Bernard has made two movies, one called Peshmerga, the other is about the liberation of Mosul that I highly recommend, where he actually was on the front lines with the Kurds in the fight against ISIS. And you talked about in the last issue of our magazine a betrayal of the Kurds. I think tomorrow is the one-year anniversary of their referendum, trying to declare a state in northern Iraq. How crucial have the Kurds been in the fight against ISIS, and what do you mean by a betrayal? What happened?
There is two questions. First of all, about, if I may insist 1 second, the Kurds being the best fighters. It's not just words. I have a very precise proof of that. One of the two movies I made, which you know, and which Tom Kaplan knows very well also, he organized a screening of this film in front of the General Assembly of the United Nations. It is about the Battle of Mosul, the film we did show at the UN. Battle of Mosul films the liberation of the capital of the Caliphate by the Kurds and the Iraqi Shia militias. Anyone who sees this movie with objective spirit sees the difference. The Kurds, valiant, economizing their forces, having the respect of the life, theirs and the others, and making a modern, precise war. The Iraqi, sponsored, backed, equipped, and advised by the Iranians, a dirty war, inefficient, and with a very high cost. This is what we mean, Tom Kaplan and myself, when we speak about their incredible well-doing at war. About our mistake, 1 year ago, day for day, the Kurds organized a big referendum on the question of knowing if the Kurdish people wished or not one day, maybe a remote day, independence. The reply was a massive yes. The reply to this yes of the Kurdish people was a massive attack by the Turks, by the Iranians, by the Syrians in a way, and by the Iraqi army sponsored by the Iranians. Massive attack. Attack on the ground. They grasped and stole the oil field of the Kurds. Attack on the air. They made a huge blockade and they transformed, till a recent day, the whole Kurdistan in a jail, in an open jail. It was a terrible reply to this democratic referendum. How did the West, America and Europe react? By looking elsewhere, by doing as if nothing happened, by doing as if they were not concerned. We had a debt regarding vis-à-vis these people, and to my surprise, to the surprise of my partner in JFK, Tom Kaplan, and to the surprise and despair of the Kurds themselves, the debt was not paid. Or we paid the Kurds with an incredible quantity of despise. I tell you that because I say it here, but I tried to say it to the principal concerned, to those who are in charge. I went to say it in my country to Élysée Palace. I was received, I had the honor of being received in White House few months ago, by diplomatic operatives of the vice president and of the president. I said it openly and with my heart and my brain, because as it was just reference also, the two go together. It's a big mistake to believe that stability and order are provided by dictatorship. This is the biggest mistake of realpolitik. Dictatorships like Iraq, like Iran, like Syria are not factors of order. At the end of the day, they are always factors of instability. The only factor, the only maker of order and stability are democracies. Israel is a doer of stability because it is a democracy. The Kurdistan could be, how do you say, a bulwark of stability because of what we said regarding the moral and political values which they incarnate. So it has been a big mistake. It has been a big moral fault by our countries to abandon the Kurds, not to endorse their referendum. Endorsing would not have meant encouraging them to have an immediate state, of course, but it would have meant to escort the movement, to applaud this expression of a democratic will, to help the world to build a calendar on years, depending on negotiation with the federal state and so on. We did not. We threatened and we did let the crime be committed by the Iran and the Turks against the Kurds.
Tom, why? What is driving that betrayal? Is it concern about how Turkey would react, or what is the reason for the U.S. policy?
The Kurds have an expression that their only friends are the mountains. And history has shown that to be the case. As I said, if you accept that the Kurds have been responsible players, that they share our values, that they provide a strategic alliance for that region that is so valuable, the reality, however, is that they are always viewed as being indispensable when they're needed and expendable when the crisis passes. And so you see that after Mosul fell to Daesh, to ISIS, the Kurds were ironically in an extremely strong position to be able to press the very weakened Iraqi state to agree to their terms of independence. They didn't do it because they realized that to achieve their aspirations at gunpoint was not going to create an enduring peace. So they were told, wait, your time will come, your time will come. We understand, we appreciate your forbearance. Once the crisis passed, it was as if they were treated like a jilted lover. And they became yesterday's news. But this is the norm for the Kurds. If we go back to the end of the First World War and the Treaty of Sèvres in 1920, and then the revocation of the promises to the Kurds by the Treaty of Lausanne, if you look at the promises that were made by Saddam Hussein, the promises that were made by Iran, the stop-and-go practices of the Turks, the reality is that they are caught between many different obnoxious forces. And when they are not needed, they are abandoned. Their only friends become the mountains. And that's why Justice for Kurds was created, because we wanted to be able to show that we are part of their mountain chain. They may indeed only have mountains as their friends, but with people like Bernard-Henri Lévy, and the people who have stood up and said, we want to be part of this, we have joined that mountain chain. When you mention, put aside the moral issue, I don't believe, particularly in an age of such astonishing cynicism and transactionalism, that it is in our national interest not to have a moral imperative in our policy. We owe a debt of gratitude to the Kurds. They have been, as BHL referenced, the bulwark against Daesh. They have been the front line in Syria and in Iraq. They have always been there and managed to rise to the occasion without then resorting to the kind of barbarism that you often see accompany military campaigns in that region. We owe them. There's nothing wrong. To the contrary, I think there's everything right for a superpower to say, you were there for us when we needed you, we will be there for you. We made promises, we will keep them. If you betray your promises, then all the other people to whom you make promises in the future will always remember that your words fall on empty ground, that they are hollow. That's not in anyone's strategic interest. You want that when you say, I give you my word, that people know they can bank it. And that's precisely what we have not done with the people who deserve it most.
Bernard, so both of you have founded JFK, neither one of you is Kurdish. What is the goal of the organization? What would you like to see? What is you trying to achieve with JFK?
To make the cause of the Kurds better known, to try to, what we are just talking about since 21 minutes, to have that said more and more, number one. Number two, we would like in JFK the youth of our three countries, France, America, and Kurdistan, to know each other better. We already appointed some student ambassadors in Western universities, popularizing the cause of the Kurds. And we will organize, hopefully rather soon, some travel of young kids of Kurdistan in the West, kids of America and France to Kurdistan. And maybe more important, our dream regarding JFK would be that this debt which we are mentioning and which has not been paid back, the best way to pay it back now, the best way would have been to support militarily, of course. Another way to pay the debt, by the way, would be to support the Kurds today, because, by the way, they are in the process, in these hours, in the next hours, the Kurds will make the president of Iraq, and the Kurds will make the prime minister of Iraq. If I were Mr. Trump or Mr. Macron, I would really take care of that. They are in the process of making the kings of Iraq, which is strategically rather important. But our modest dream is to have this debt paid by the following thing. We dream of a monument in New York City, if possible in Manhattan, honoring the bravery and the sacrifice of the Kurds. In the French villages, we have in many villages a little stone with the names of those who fell for the fatherland, tombés pour la patrie. This is a place of mourning, of sorrow, and of memory for true French patriots. Our dream is in New York, a monument of this sort, praising those who fell for our common fatherland, which is the fatherland of ideas, and as Tom said, of values. I hope that in the next month or years, but I hope month, this monument will exist and that we will all be able to go and pay tribute to these great people in Manhattan.
One last question, we're running out of time, but can you talk a little bit about the role of women in Kurdish culture and it's sort of, that the Peshmerga is actually, women make up a significant portion of it. Can you talk about, how unusual, how different it is than other countries in the region?
How the women and men?
In Kurdistan or in Kurdish culture?
The relationship is not perfect, of course, but where is it perfect? Even in the West, we know now how the apparent equality covered a hell of discrimination, harassment, and so on. But this being said, in Kurdistan, I saw really the image of equality, and equality especially on the battlefield. And the people of ISIS, this was one of the most funny and interesting things which I registered. The fighters of ISIS were especially afraid of the women fighters. Number one, because they were very brave, and number two, because they were so stupid. The ISIS men, the ISIS people, they were so crazy that they believed that to be killed by a woman would prevent them from going up to paradise. So they were, and they still are, in Syria, the best fighters.
Well, thank you both very much. We wish you all success in bringing justice to the Kurds, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll know